All right. Hello once again, and welcome to another class. We are looking at the JAMB syllabus, chemistry JAMB syllabus to be precise. And for those of us that are regular on this channel, you'll have seen other videos on other topics that have been treated before now. And today we are going to be looking at environmental pollution. That's one of the topics in the JAM chemistry syllabus. So we are looking at environmental um, pollution. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Anjori Femi Excel. I hold a BSc in chemistry from the University of Ibadan. I also have a postgraduate diploma in education from the Federal College of Education, Technical Apoka. And I also have a master's degree in environmental and analytical chemistry from Redeemers University, Ede, Osun State. And I will be your teacher, your tutor, whatever name you want to call me anyway. In this series on the chemistry jam syllabus as we move through the syllabus topic by topic. Just like I said earlier, we're looking at environmental pollution. It's not something that is strange to most of us. I know that either we have contributed or we have been a victim of it, one way or the other, we'll have had an encounter, an experience with pollution in our environment, either as a contributor or, so to speak, as a victim of the act of another person. So we want to look at that in this lesson, and our learning objective for this class are the following. We are going to be looking at it is expected that by the end of this lesson that students should be able to one, define environmental pollution. Number two, identify different types of pollution. The third learning objective is to explain sources of pollution. And also the fourth one is different to differentiate between biodegradable and non-biodegradable pollutants. And then the fifth learning objective is to discuss the effect of pollution on human health and the environment. And also, finally, we are to, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to suggest control measures for the different types of pollution that we have. Okay, without much ado, let's jump into the class proper. All right, environmental pollution. That's the first thing that we're going to look at. I will start with the definition of what environmental pollution is. Environmental pollution refers to the introduction of harmful substances into the environment, causing adverse effects on living organisms and ecosystem or on the ecosystem. So that's basically what environmental pollution is. The introduction of certain substances that are harmful into the environment and then having a negative bearing or a negative impact on living organism and the ecosystem as a whole. And that is what environmental pollution is. It can also be defined as the introduction of certain substances that disrupt the natural balance of the environment. So the introduction of certain substances that disrupt or contravenes the natural balance of the environment is what we call environmental pollution. And when you look at the picture beside on the slide, you discover that many pollution is taking place at the same time. You can have air pollution, water pollution, and so on and so forth. You have even land pollution, so to speak, and so many pollution being depicted there. And one way or the other, we sometimes we contribute also either consciously or unconsciously into this. And the whole essence of treating this topic is to bring us this awareness about this, and not only to bring us an awareness about this, but to sensitize us so that we can also sensitize others. And that's the fundamental reason for going through this lesson. Beyond just passing, the course, or if you say question in it in JAM, being able to answer the question, we should also be sensitized so that we can become change agents in our environment. Okay, having said that, let's look at the next slide now. Types of pollution. Types of pollution is the next slide. Types of pollution. Permit me to quickly close this particular. Um, okay, so types of pollution is the next thing that we need to talk about. And Well, the major types of pollution that we have are air pollution, water pollution, soil or land pollution. But beyond this, we also have certain pollutions, and well, basically, JAM wants us to cover air pollution, water pollution, and soil or land pollution, as the case may be. That's what you see clearly stated in the syllabus. But beyond these, we also have noise pollution, we also have thermal pollution, and radioactive pollution. So in your own leisure time, you can actually research more about noise pollution, thermal pollution, and radioactive pollution. So our major focus for types of pollution during the course of this lesson will be on air pollution, water pollution, and then soil or land pollution. So on to the next one now as we take the types of pollution one after the other. We first and foremost start off with air pollution. We have to quickly give a quick definition of what air pollution is. Air pollution is simply is the presence of undesirable solid or gaseous particles in the air in quantities that are harmful to human health and the environment. So when there's a release of certain undesirable solids or gaseous particle in the air, in a quantity that is harmful to the human health and environment, what that connotes is air pollution. What that means is there's a pollution of the air. And there are certain pollutants that we must be conversant with in the air. There are different types of air pollutants. Number one is what we call the primary air pollutants. Now, primary air pollutants are basically pollutants that are emitted directly from identifiable source and are produced by natural events. So example of a primary air pollutant is dust storm. When there's a dust storm, it's an example of air pollution. Dust raises up, rises up into the atmosphere and covers the atmosphere. It affects visibility, it affects the respiratory organs and so on and so forth like that. It's going to affect the eyes and so on and so forth. So this is a primary example, or this is an example of primary air pollutant. So we can have dust storms and then volcanic eruption. These are natural events that occurs, and it's a very good example. They are very good example of primary air pollutants. Also, human activities, which we call anthropogenic activities of human beings, which includes emission from vehicles and industries and so on and so forth. These contribute to pollution of the air and they are grouped under air pollutants. That's the first one. The second air pollutants that we must also be conversant with is what we call the secondary air pollutants. Now, we said these are pollutants that are produced in the atmosphere when certain chemical reactions take place among the primary pollutants. So when certain chemical reaction takes place among the primary pollutants, we refer to that as secondary air pollutants. Then another group of air pollutants is what we call the particulates. The particulates. Now, these are small pieces of solid material, for example, smoke particles from fire, bits of asbestos, dust particles, and ash from industries dispersed into the atmosphere. So when you have this, what you have basically are particulates, and they're dispersed into the atmosphere, and they have very terrible effect on humans, livestock, and even the general environment, so to speak. So aerosol is a general term for particles suspended in hairspray from pressure cans, and is an example of particulates that we are referring to. Okay, having said that, let's look at the sources of air pollution. There are four main types of pollution sources, and if you look at the diagram, you can actually see that we have the mobile sources, we have the stationary sources, you have the area sources, then you have the natural sources, all depicted in the diagram that we have there. So for mobile sources, we have pollution from our cars, pollution from our buses, and then from motorcycles, from planes, from trucks, from trains, and so on and so forth like that. Those are mobile sources. They are moving, and they keep on polluting the air as they move, so to speak. Then the other one is what we call the stationary sources, of air pollution. And if you look at the diagram also, you can see that the stationary sources include the one from air pollution that results from industry, power plants, sewage treatments, and factories, oil refineries, and so on and so forth like that. Okay. Then the area sources, we said that one is stationary because it's just in a position and then it has been released into the atmosphere. The pollution is being emitted from a stationary point into the atmosphere and polluting or making undesirable particles to enter into the air. Okay, the other source of air pollution is what we call the area sources. And when we talk about the area sources, we're talking about sources from agricultural areas, cities that we can call maybe industrial cities that have certain, activities that they carry out that pollutes the air, and wood and burning fireplace. You have a chimney in a place, you put wood and you light it up because you want to warm the house, or maybe an activity is being carried out in a particular area in which you need to burn wood, or they need to, create a fireplace like we have in our villages and so on and so forth like that. Those are area sources of air pollution. Then we can also talk about the final one, which is the natural sources of air pollution. We've made mention of this before, but I'm going to just to just talk about it one more time for emphasis sake. So natural sources of air pollution are the wind-blown dust. When you have wind, then you have the wildfire. Like some of us, if you are conversant, you learned some few weeks ago, we talked about the fire that occurred in California in USA. These are examples of wildfire, just a raging fire, uncontrollable, just going on and on, destroying life, destroying properties, and not only that, releasing harmful substances into the atmosphere. Then we have volcanoes. Volcanoes are also examples of natural sources of air pollution. Okay, let's move on to the next one now, and let's talk about examples of air pollutants. The basic examples of air pollutants are number one, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, even carbon dioxide is an example of air pollutants. Carbon monoxide is terrible because when it mixes with the blood, it creates carboxyl hemoglobin, which is not so good for us. So it also competes with oxygen in the atmosphere. So carbon monoxide is an example of air pollutants. The other one is sulfur dioxide. And sulfur dioxide yeah, is responsible for the acid rain that we have. So when it goes into the atmosphere, it's also very, very terrible, and its result or its effect is also very bad on the atmosphere, on the environment. Pardon me, please. They have nitrogen oxides. The same thing, it can also form acid rains also. So it's an example of air pollutants. Then we have particulate matters like PM2.5 and PM10, which are particulate matters that can also be a major worry in the atmosphere. So we also have a volatile organic compound, which examples include the CFC, the chlorofluorocarbons, and these are basically although it is banned in most developed countries, but we still discover that in some appliances in Africa and some other third world, we still have this CFC in it. Also in some spray cans of some items that are being used, you can still find CFC, and it is very, very terrible to the atmosphere, because one of the things that it does is that it aids the depletion of the ozone layer, and it is very, very bad. So it's an example of air pollutant also. Benzene is also a volatile organic compound, and so on and so forth like that. So what are the effects of air pollution? Basically, the effect of air pollution includes one, respiratory diseases. Air pollution triggers respiratory diseases like asthma and bronchitis. These are things that air pollution can trigger. It also results in global warming and climate change. I was saying earlier, when there's a release of CO2 into the atmosphere, it can aid global warming, and it affects the climate, causing erratic features in our climatic condition, or or the normal climate condition of the environment. So it leads to climate change. Then another effect of air pollution is acid rain, just like I made mention of. When SO2 mixed with water, it gets into the atmosphere, it mixes with water, it can come back as an acid and pours down on the environment. And when acid rain is showered on the environment, one of the things that it does is that it affects the plants. It also affects our buildings because it washes off the paint, or denatures them, so to speak. Affects corrodes the paint, affects even the roofing sheet, and so on and so forth. and even the finishes of cars, like the paint and all that, can also be affected when there's an acid rain, shower on the earth. And these are effects of air pollution. Another effect of air pollution is ozone layer depletion. Just like I talked about volatile organic compounds like CFCs, when they get into the atmosphere, they have a way of depleting the ozone layer. And when the ozone layer is depleted, it affects us as human beings because the number of ultraviolet rays that gets to us that the ozone layer is supposed to shield will not be well shielded. So we get exposed to more than what we should be exposed to as human, and this can result in cancer and so on and so forth. So another effect of air pollution, just like I said, leading up to that is mutation and cancer. When certain things that we are not supposed to be exposed to, we get exposed to them, it can result in in mutation. Pardon me, please, and cancer. So these are effects of air pollution. All right. Having said that, let's look at another thing. What are the control measures that we can put in place? The control measure for air pollution. There are certain things that can be done to check the pollution of the air. And we said fundamentally we can use two approaches rather, to control air pollution. Number one is the preventive technique rather, and then the second one is called the effluent control. These are two basic fundamental approaches that we can deploy to control air pollution. For the preventive technique, what we employ is like reducing the use of fossil fuels. Because fossil fuel is a major source of air pollution. Fossil fuel that we use in our cars, fossil fuel that we use in our generators, and so on and so forth. So when we reduce the use of fossil fuels and we go green, so to speak, it helps to prevent, air pollution. Another preventive technique that can be deployed is improving the quality of vehicular fuel. Yes, there are things that we can add. There are certain treatment that can be done to improve the quality of vehicular fuel so that the emission would not be destructive to the environment. Then increasing the use of renewable energy. We can't overemphasize this. We can't even talk so much about it. Renewable energy is the way to go if we want to really protect our environment. Use of solar energy, hydro power energy, and so on and so forth. Things that are renewable and that will not have an inimical impact or a negative impact on our environment, especially on the air. So providing a greater height to the stacks can help in facilitating the discharge of pollutants as far away from the ground as possible. Also, industry should be located in places to minimize the effect of pollution after considering the topography and the wind direction. So these are basically preventive measures that can be deployed. What about effluent? Okay, substitution of raw material is another preventive measure that can also be deployed for as a control measure for air pollution. Like take for instance, if there are certain raw materials that we can use in lieu of certain ones that we know that can be destructive or harmful to the environment, we should substitute. I'll give you an example. Carbon fluoro, CFCs. Yes, CFCs can actually be replaced with what HFCs. So we can actually replace them with HFCs. So instead of using CFCs, we can replace them with HFCs, which are not as damaging or destructive as CFCs. So using public transport instead of too many vehicles, on the road at the same time. Because when you have so many vehicles, private vehicles on the road, what happens is that they emit a lot of, a lot of gases that are very, very harmful to the atmosphere. So if we promote or make our public transport system, I mean now, very good and effective, it will encourage people because now take for instance, if you have a public transport system set up, take the BRT that we have in Lagos as an example. If I'm so correct, I think the BRT should be able to sit conveniently about 50 people. If I'm correct, I don't know the exact figure, but let's just assume that it can take a minimum of 50 passengers at a go. 50 passengers heading to the Highland or 50 passengers heading to Ikeja or wherever it is in Lagos or in any part of Nigeria or of the world as the case may be. Now, if you have 50 people boarding, that's public transport that has been provided. What you have done is that instead of you having 50 different vehicles of different models and make and design and all that, coming on the road at that same time, emitting so many gases that can be very harmful to the environment, you can just have just one bus. And that bus, if it is well treated in such a way that the emissions are, environmental friendly, you have gone a long way to reduce air pollution. So these are another, substitution mechanisms that we can bring into, controlling air pollution around us. Okay, I will talk about the preventive techniques. Then we need to look at the effluent control, which is another type of control measure for air pollution. And we said basically that this includes devices for removal of pollutants from the flue gases before they escape into the atmosphere through filters, electrostatic precipitators, and so on, and so on and so forth. So effluent control basically does what we call, let's just bring about this device. Let's remove this pollutant before the gases are let off into the environment. Let us have devices in these particular, maybe buses or cars or whatsoever it is, or machinery or machines, as the case may be. Let's just have certain devices that will help us to treat the gases that will be, coming from, these either machines or vehicles and so on and so forth. So when we treat them, using filters and static precipitators and all that, then when you release whatever it is that you're releasing into the atmosphere, because it has been treated, certain harmful portion has been taken away or has been reduced drastically in such a way that to have a minimal or a next to it will have a minimal impact on the environment. So these are other measures that we can actually deploy also. And then using proper exhaust gas treatment in vehicles to minimize the effect of harmful gases is another very, very important measures that we can deploy in order to check air pollution. Okay, now let's talk about the next one now. The next type of pollution is water pollution. Water pollution. And basically, water pollution is the contamination of water bodies, rivers, lakes, oceans, and so on by harmful substance. So when certain harmful substances are brought into the water body, what happens is that there will be pollution of the water. Now, what are the sources of water pollution? The sources of water pollution are about two, basically. We have what we call the point source, and then we have the non-point source of water pollution. The point source is a situation whereby you have when a source of pollution can be readily identified because it has a definite source and place where it enters the water. That's the point source. An example of the point source of water pollution is municipal and industrial discharge pipes. When you look at this diagram closely, you can also see the source point. This is a source point, for water pollution. So when you have the municipal and then the industrial discharge pipes, you know that okay, it can be identified. The sources of such can be identified. So such a water pollution is called point source. And the other one we call the non-point source water pollution. When a source of pollution cannot be readily identified, you cannot place your finger and say, okay, this is where this pollution is coming from. Such as agricultural runoff, acid rain, etc. They are said to be non-point source of pollution. So you can have some non-point source of pollution, and then you have the point source pollution, as the case may be. So these are sources of water pollution. Okay, what are the effects of water pollution? The effects of water pollution, it has many effects actually, and the effect ranges from harming human health, or harm to that, or damaging the ecosystem and disruption of the food chain. So with regard to the human health, what you see is that when you take in a water that is polluted, it can result into cholera, excessive stooling and vomiting. It can also result to dysentery, just passing out watery, feces, and then it can result to typhoid also. It can also affect us in the sense that it can result to hepatitis A, polio, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases. When the source of water that you're taking is loaded with heavy metals, it can result in a cardiovascular, diseases. The same thing for cancer too. So one must be very careful. This is one of the effects of water pollution. The second effect is on our ecosystem, whereby it affects biodiversity. Biodiversity is lost. That is, the ability for us to have multiple species cohabiting in our ecosystem can be affected when there's a pollution that affects a particular organism. What will happen is either you reduce the population of that organism drastically, or they can even go to extinction as a result of the water they are drinking that is making them that is killing them off. And what happens is that there will be a reduction in the biodiversity, or a loss in the biodiversity in the ecosystem. It can also result in eutrophication, whereby you have, especially when you use fertilizers, then you have so many nitrogen being pumped into the water and then resulting in algal bloom. And this can actually affect transportation, in which, the algal bloom will affect passage of, ships, canoes, and so on and so forth, and affect fishing activities, because there's just a dense nutrient in the water, and it results in vegetations, as in algal, or algal bloom, so to speak, in that water, which is not so good. And it also results in habitat destruction. Water pollution can bring about a complete destruction of certain habitats. Like, I'll give you an example. When there's an oil spill, like those people in the Niger Delta area, when there's an oil spill, you discover that habitats are destroyed. Organisms that dwells in particular places will not be able to live in such places. Even human beings, not only animals, but not just with the fishes and all that will be affected. Even human beings can also be affected. The habitat can become destroyed as a result of that, water pollution. Then food chain disruption, toxins will tend to move from, probably because of water pollution, it can lead to toxin movement from a lower part of on the ecosystem to a higher part, of moving from one part of the ecosystem to the other. Toxins will keep on moving and transversing the whole of the water body and affecting a large chunk of people, organisms, not only human beings, animals, and so on and so forth, like that. It can also result in contaminated food. Our fishes become, they absorb these harmful substances in the water, heavy metal, and so many other toxic chemicals has been pumped into the water, into the water bodies. And because of that, what happened is that the fish will take them in, and then they will accumulate the fish to the point that when we catch those fishes, or any aquatic organism for consumption or whatsoever, you now discover that we are now taking in directly some of these toxic materials that the fishes and the aquatic organism have ingested. So our crabs, our crayfish, our fishes, and so on and so forth, they get, this toxic material from the polluted water. It gets into their body, it accumulates, then we feed on them, and then we get contaminated by sodium. So it can lead to contamination or contaminated food. Also, economic effect of yeah, effect of another effect of water pollution is the economic effect, and it can be quite challenging. Remediation of the contaminated water can take millions of naira, even millions of dollars. It can be expensive to manage. When there's a pollution of the water, it can be pretty expensive to manage. I was talking about algal bloom the other time. For one to be able to clear algal bloom, it will take a lot of money, because you have to keep moving through and taking off those the foliage, the plants that has grown on water and every other thing. And not only that, it is capital intensive, so much capital intensive. And that is why up till tomorrow you still see people in the Niger Delta will say that, oh, let them come and help remediate their waters and all that, and the oil companies are dragging their feet. And the reason is because it is capital intensive, and because it's a constant thing, they keep on spilling into the environment, and it keeps contaminating the water. So it's expensive to manage, water pollution. So the best approach will still be to prevent it, or to bring in certain measures that will reduce it drastically to the barest minimum. Okay, having said that, let's talk about the examples of water pollutants now. Now, from the diagram, you can see that we can have metals, heavy metals to be precise, nitrates, pathogens, dyes, phosphate, fluorides, pesticides. These are all examples of pollutants, that we can find in water. And heavy metals can be cancerous. They can lead to development of cancer. Pesticide also is not so good in the environment. And one of the reasons is because most of the time they accumulate and they are retained in the environment, and they don't go off easily. Plastic waste, we take our bottled water, we just dump it anyhow. It results in pollution of water. And the reason is because plastic waste are not easily degradable. They are not easily degradable. So it takes a lot of years, and they'll just keep on, polluting, affecting, leaching the chemicals that was used in the chemical that is part of what was used in forming the plastic will keep on getting it will be leached into the water, giving a constant pollution, and are also serving as a platform for bacteria, for pathogens to latch on. And when they latch on it, they will just keep thriving and just polluting the water and so on and so forth. So pathogens like bacteria and viruses are also examples of water pollution. And then nitrate and phosphate, especially from fertilizers, are also examples of water pollutants. Okay, now let's look at the control measure for water pollution now. Basically, we can use the preventive techniques and also the influence approach method, for the control of water pollution. So these are some of the methods or the control measures that we can deploy in controlling water pollution. So the treated effluent can be reused for either garden or cooling purpose, wherever, whichever. What I'm trying to say is that we can actually treat water and then run them through treatment plants, and treat the waste, and then in such a way that you can actually extract meaningful things and take out things that may be harmful, and then that water can actually be reused and all that. So it saves water, it helps the environment, and then it reduces, pollution. So water from our homes, from the industries can be channeled to a treatment plant where they can be, acted upon appropriately for them to be reused, and then it helps to control the pollution of water. Okay, I would say that let's move on to the next one now, talk about soil or land pollution. Now, the degradation of the land or soil due to the presence of harmful chemical and waste materials is what we refer to as soil or land pollution. Degradation of the land or soil due to the presence of what? Harmful chemicals and waste materials. So when we have it done like that, these are examples. These are things that can affect, our soil and the land as a whole. And there are various sources of land pollution or soil pollution, which includes industrial and domestic waste disposal, pesticides and chemical fertilizers, and deforestation and mining activities. Now, what are the examples of land pollutants that we have? We have heavy metals like cadmium, lead, pesticides and herbicides, industrial chemicals like the PCBs and the dioxins, and also plastic waste. These are all examples of land pollutants. A particular research was carried out in Mina Metropolis, and it was discovered that after sampling and all that, the amount of pollution in the air, a large chunk of pollution on the land, pardon me, and the soil, was as a result of waste disposal, 50% large chunk, then 22% from soil erosion, and then atmospheric decomposition, agricultural chemicals like pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and so on and so forth. And then urbanization also affected our land or affect the land pollution. And this can actually be extrapolated for, other parts of Nigeria and even other parts of the world. These are major sources, of pollution of the soil and the land. Okay. All right now. So what are the effects of land pollution? If you look at this diagram closely, focusing on the inner part of the diagram now, you discover that there are a lot of effects of land and soil pollution. Reduced input of organic matter, limited buffering and filtering capacity, reduced crop yield, polluted soil are not suitable for residential, agricultural, and recreational use. These are effects, reduced vegetation cover and flood control capacity, erosion, and also, and then promotion of antimicrobial resistance and loss of genetic resources. And this is very, very critical. When there is pollution of the soil, it can lead to generation of antimicrobial resistance substances or even drugs, so to speak, as a result of that, ecotoxicity and loss of biodiversity. When there is a pollution of the soil. Okay. So we need to look at the control measures now. The control measures for land pollution. Number one, prevention of soil erosion is a control measure that can be deployed, and we can do that using this following three steps, like continuous control trenches, live check dams, and then gabion structure. These are examples of prevention for soil erosion that we can deploy. Then we have practicing sustainable agriculture. When we practice sustainable agriculture, it also helps to reduce or control land pollution, like organic farming, instead of just using chemicals all the time. Crop rotation, integrated pest management. These are examples of sustainable agriculture that we can deploy in order to facilitate or control land pollution. Then we have solid waste management, which is very critical. Managing solid waste properly prevent degradation of land and the soil. So these are measures that can be deployed to guide against land pollution. Okay, we need to now look at biodegradable, degradable, and non-biodegradable pollutants now. Now, biodegradable pollutants are substances that can be broken down naturally by microorganisms. They can be broken down naturally by microorganisms. I'll give an example like food waste, sewage, paper, wood, plant-based materials. They can be easily degraded, by microorganisms, naturally degraded by microorganisms. And that's why we refer to them as biodegradable pollutants. Now, the reverse is non-biodegradable pollutants. And these are substances that do not decompose easily and persist in the environment. They do not decompose easily and they persist in the environment. What are examples of non-biodegradable degradable pollutants? Plastics. I told you about plastic the other time that they stay in the environment for so many years. They don't get degrade, and they act as template for pathogens to grow and so on and so forth. And then leaching their chemicals, the chemical that was used in making them into the water bodies, affecting and polluting the water. So plastic is an example of a non-biodegradable pollutant. Glass is another example. Heavy metals like lead, like mercury. Synthetic chemicals like pesticides and DDT, these are synthetic chemicals that, they are persistent and they stay in the environment, they are non-biodegradable, and that's why we must be very, very mindful of how we treat our environment. We must be mindful of the things that we throw in. We must be mindful of how we dispose certain materials. We must dispose them in such a way that it will not have a debilitating effect on us. Because one thing about this life is that it's just like a cycle. You may do this at the source, but it has a way of still coming back to, to bite us, so to speak. So there's a need for us to be mindful of these pollutants, and then to be also be careful of how we treat our wastes, either waste from our homes, waste from the industry, and so on and so forth like that. So these are very, very important things that we should take note of. So it's just like I said earlier, it's just beyond answering questions from this section in the JAMB examination. No, it's beyond that. It goes far, far, far beyond that. What it's so important is for us to become a change agent and to sensitize all that, and also to become aware in such a way that we protect our environment and don't have to destroy the environment. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I would like to just quickly summarize and just say that in the course of this lesson, we have touched on environmental pollution. We've defined what it is. We also talked about the major types of pollution that we have. We talked about three major types, and I gave an assignment that you should go and look up, information on noise, thermal, and radioactive pollution. And we also talk about pollutants that can be biodegradable and non-biodegradable. We have also looked at the sources of pollution, which include, industrial activities, vehicular emissions, improper waste disposal, and deforestation, and so on and so forth. We've also touched on pollution and their effects, on the respiratory organs, waterborne illness, habitat destruction, and climate change, and so on and so forth. And we have also extensively looked at the control measures that we can deploy in order to be able to manage pollution in whatever form that it may come. Okay, so that's that. So at this junction, if you have questions based on this lesson, please do well to put them in the comment section. I'll pick them up from there and then react to them appropriately as I'm supposed to. And if there are areas that you need clarity on, you need clarification, also drop them in the comment section. I will respond to them accordingly. I would just like to evaluate this lesson with these few questions. And the first one is, which of the following is an example of a biodegradable pollutant? If you know the answer, please put your answer in the comment section and I will react to it accordingly. Which of the following is not a source of water pollution? Among the options that are listed, which one do you think is not an example or is not a source of water pollution? And the third evaluation question is the best method to control soil pollution is what? Okay, so put your answer in the comment section and then I'll pick it up and react to it accordingly. And the next one, which of these pollutants is a major contributor to global warming? We talked about this in the course of the lesson. So tell me what the answer is. Just put it in the comment section and I will react to it accordingly. Now, which gas is most responsible for acid rain? Yeah, we have talked about this also. So tell me, which one is most responsible for acid rain? Put it in the comment section. All right. At this junction, I would like to draw a curtain to the lesson for today, and I want to really thank you for listening and also watching this video. I want to implore you to do your own research too, especially for those things I said you should do. Find out more information about other pollutants like noise pollution and radioactive pollution, sound pollution, and so on and so forth. And I wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.